All right, guys, this is the moment you've been waiting for. You found a property and you want to place an offer. But just remember there's three characteristics of a property that you want, right? It checks the big three. And ideally, it's going to be within your budget, the property makes income, and you're willing to live there. So, just to recap, right, the budget is basically that it's going to be below your debt to income ratio of 49%, right? So that goes to show that you're not going to be under duress to make the payments. Next is the income, right? We want to make sure that it has 8% capitalization rate, and that does that capitalization rate allow you to allow the income to pay for that mortgage, and the current rents from the rent roll or from the current leases, like how does it look like in comparison to the marketplace? And you validate that by going on Craigslist, Zillow, Hotpads, and then from there, that's how we can double check that hey, the current income on the property is good. Now, as a rule of thumb, let's say for instance you ideally want to net $150 per unit after expenses. Okay, so those are two good rules of thumb: is the 8% capitalization rate, and you want a net income of $150 per door. Now, last but not least of the big three is, do you see yourself living there? Okay, I fell in love with my first fourplex, and it was a great joy to live there. So it's kind of a part of the process as well. If you're not having fun, then honestly, there really isn't a point to do it. Okay, now we're going to go over the anatomy of a purchase contract. So, when you place an offer, what you're physically submitting to the seller is a purchase contract. You're saying, hey, Mr. Seller, I would like to purchase your property. Here is a contract, so that basically shows an agreement between us. Okay, and there are 9 parts of a purchase contract. Which, don't worry, I'm gonna upload a blank purchase contract that is from the state of Arizona, but for the most part, from what I've been seeing, that this is basically universal. Now, talk to your attorney if there is anything else that stands out. Like, for instance, Illinois is a little bit different. But overall, though, when you place an offer, right, there are distinct characteristics within the purchase contract that allows the seller to know all the details of your offer, right? So here are all here are all the parts. The most important part is the purchase price, right? What are you going to pay the seller? And typically, right, the asking price is the sale price. So if a seller is listing a property for $300,000, the seller is asking for $300,000. And then this is where you get to submit how much you're willing to pay for it in relationship to their asking price. Now, the closing costs, okay? Closing costs are basically underwritten fees, title fees, mortgage fees, bank fees, transfer fees, taxes. They get kind of consolidated into those payments, and I'll put a settlement statement, a blank one at least, or actually not a blank one, but I'll put a settlement statement attached to this course so you can see what it looks like. And a settlement statement outlines every single expense in the transaction, and you'll see also what the closing costs are. But those are the things that think about it as like a think about it as a transaction fee. What does it cost for the deal to be transferred from the buyer to the seller? Now, the next part of the purchase contract is going to be the home warranty, right? I have seen both a seller pay for a home warranty or a buyer pay for a home warranty. So, for instance, let's say if the buyer is nervous and saying, I'm not really sure about like the condition of the property, I would like the seller to pay for a home warranty. Well, then the seller can agree or disagree to pay for a home warranty. Now, I have seen seller goes, listen, I'm not going to make any updates on this property, so I'm willing to pay for home warranty. Or I've seen a buyer just being like, hey, you know what? I feel better, so I'm going to pay for the home warranty myself, and I can sleep better at night knowing that I paid for a home warranty. Personally, I don't use home warranties. The reason is because is I've found trustworthy technicians, right? Those are our plumbers, our electrician, our handyman. Okay, the fact that I have good rapport with these technicians, that I've have the confidence to never fork out 700, 800, up to $1,000 on a home warranty. Because if I have a trusted plumber, if I have an issue, a plumbing issue, I'm gonna just call my plumber, and I'm gonna save myself that $1,000. Like, or if I have a trusty, handy dandy HVAC technician, well then I'm gonna just go to them if I have an HVAC issue. So why am I gonna have a home warranty company and then just wait around for 10 days to see if they're gonna send someone to appraise the issue and inspect it and then just part out the issue. Whereas, like, if you have a technician that you trust, you just go straight to the technician. But nevertheless, there is a line item in the purchase contract that discusses who is going to pay for the home warranty. So, are you saying, hey, is the seller going to pay for it or is the buyer going to pay for it? Okay, so the next part of a purchase contract is the appraisal, right? Do you want the seller to pay for the appraisal? From when I sell properties, okay, I I never pay for the buyers. If I'm a seller, I will never pay for the buyer's appraisal. You're basically gonna pay. Remember what we discussed earlier. The appraiser represents the bank. Okay, the appraiser does not represent the buyer, and the appraiser does not represent the seller. The appraiser is simply there to validate that the underlying value of the intrinsic value of the property. So, for instance, if they're going to, when the bank loans out $300,000, they're sending an appraiser out there to validate that it's worth $300,000. So, yeah, if I'm a seller, you bet I'm never going to pay for, unless you're desperate, right? Unless the seller is desperate. Other than that, I would never pay for it. So, normally, what I've seen is the borrower pay for the appraisal, and that's going to another line item in the purchase contract. The next part of the purchase contract is the inspector, right? So in this case, like, a buyer can either forego the opportunity to hire an inspector. They still get an inspection period whether you hire an inspector or not. So in this case, like we've discussed, that an inspector validates the condition of the property and they determine the quantity and quality of the defects found and those kinds of line items. But overall, though, there is a line item for the buyer to use an inspector for the property. Next, how many days? I normally you can put 10 days. It's pretty standard. It's actually in the contract to have 10 days. But if you need a little bit more time, let's say if you're using FHA 203K, because the house is really distraught, you can just tell by walking through, and you need a contractor and an inspector to go through there to give you a proper quote, I would try to negotiate 14 days with the seller. So that's kind of how I would do that, is 10 to 14 days. Now, if you don't need a lot of time, if you're like, dang, I'm super motivated, I can just walk through this house and see that it's great, then yeah, you can even put 5, 6 days, which I've done before. Now, ideally for the seller, they're happy because they want the sooner the better, right? But most FHA lenders need 30 days because there's a lot of gymnastics, and especially the fact with interest rates currently in 2020 to be so low that, yeah, lenders are busy. But if you're watching this at another time, no matter what, if you can push your lender to close in less than 30 days, that's going to motivate the seller to take your deal so you can purchase the property. Next, right? 24 to 36 hours. So we're saying that, hey, how long are we going to give the seller to respond? So let's say you place an offer on Thursday at 5 p.m. Okay, you're going to say, hey, I'm going to give the seller until 5 p.m. on Friday, or you're going to give the seller until noon on Saturday. It's completely up to you, depending how good your offer is. If you have a really good offer, I would just say, hey, put 24-hour notice. So don't give the seller too much time to think, especially if it's a good offer. Wake them up, let them know that, hey, listen, after this, I'm walking away. All right, and yeah, this is another line item in the purchase contract as well. Let's see. The next thing in the purchase contract is, oh, there we go. Okay. So we're in the last part, which is where the seller signs your purchase contract. When the seller signs your purchase contract, that's it, guys. You are officially, quote unquote, under contract. And when you're under contract, you'll see the listing status change in the MLS, either say uh, active contingent, pending, or under contract backups. Now, if you see under contract backups, what that means is, hey, the seller is under contract with a current buyer and is willing to move forward, but the seller is willing to accept back off offers. So, in the event a buyer withdraws their offer, there is another contract waiting in the wings to take the seller up on their deal. All right, the next part is this is how you place an offer. Okay, so we have the anatomy of the purchase contract. We went over the big three line items that, hey, this is what makes the deal worth moving forward on. Last but not least, well, not last but not least, but this is how you do it. This is how you place an offer. Ready? Here we go. You contact your agent, you tell them all the details about the anatomy of the offer, how much you're willing to pay, do you need an inspection period, are you paying for the appraisal? When do you want to hear back from the seller? All those line items that we discussed in the previous section of the anatomy of the purchase contract, we tell them to write up an offer. And in essence, that's when your real estate agent will prepare the residential purchase contract. So even when it comes to the purchase contract, you're expecting your agent to write it up for you. Okay. And then once your agent is done with the purchase contract, he's going to send it over for you to sign, and you just go ahead and check it out. And then if everything checks off, hey, listen, this is an attractive offer. This is what I want to submit to the seller. Then you let them email it over and you go from there. Now, okay, just as a contingency, let's say you want to get out, you want to back out of the deal. Okay, when are the two opportunities for you to back out of the deal? Number one is the inspection period. I would say normally this is the key opportunity for you to leave the deal. Let's say you're walking the lot and you're looking at this thing and you're like, this is going to take a lot more work and a lot more money to rehab than I anticipated. Okay, that's when you basically either withdraw an offer or you just can submit a counter offer like, hey, listen, I need to discount this property by another 20 grand. There is so much work. There's almost like 60 grand of work. I need at least another $20,000 discount. Okay. During the inspection period is when you can pull out of the deal. The other opportunity for you to pull out of the deal is, let's say, for instance, you're both under contract for $300,000. Then the bank comes around during the appraisal period. This is after the inspection period. Okay, so there's two times. So if you have a 30-day close, there's two time periods in which you can probably pull out, right? We talked about the inspection period. Now the second part is the appraisal period. So this is after you've already inspected the property. The bank sends out an appraiser to validate the intrinsic value of the property. And let's say, for instance, you're both under contract for $300,000. From there, let's say the appraiser says, hey, this property is only worth 280 grand. Well, guess what? Unless the buyer forks up another 20 grand to close the gap, right? Let's say you go back to the seller and, hey, listen, the bank won't finance more than 280 because that's what they said it's worth. I cannot put more cash on because I only have money to finance. I don't have another 20 grand to come up with. The seller then can either pull out or discount the property by another 20 grand. Okay. So that's usually in a precarious situation. I've seen this done a couple times. I had a deal recently where the appraisal came 20 grand below and I couldn't believe it, but the seller agreed to drop the price to the appraisal price. And the seller just gave the buyer 20 grand cash. Now, keep in mind, right? If the buyer finances 20 grand more, it's over a 30-year period. It's really not that much. That's why you shouldn't stress about $20,000 or increasing the purchase price, right? but every dollar counts if you're the seller because that's how much money they're going to net at the end. So if the seller discounts the property $20,000 for you, the seller is literally giving you $20,000 because he has to fork it up at the end. Okay, now that's basically it, guys. All right, so that's basically when we can back up. Okay, so yeah, this is where we talk about the inspection period right here. Oh yeah, this is a good point. Is let's say for instance during the inspection period you terminate the contract, you will get your earnest money back. Okay, especially if you find catastrophic defects, it's really not going to be difficult for you to get your earnest money back. And then over here, this is the appraisal period. Oh, literally, this is what happened to me during the appraisal period as well. Let's see. Yeah, okay. All right, next. All right, guys. So that's basically the anatomy of placing an offer. Okay, and if you have any questions, shoot me some questions. But that's basically how you place an offer.